Its face is human.
It looks like exactly like a human face.
It walks on two legs.
He says if we see them, they come to attack us.
And for thousands of years, it's been part of Tibetan folklore. But could the Yeti be more than just a story?
It made a noise like this.
There is some kind of biped creature out there.
People find new species in very unexpected places.
I'm Mark Evans, a scientist on a mission. If there's a rational explanation for the Yeti, I'm determined to find it. And with ancient remains...
Oh, that is gruesome.
...yielding startling new evidence.
There is always a scientific base to any legend.
I'm starting to wonder. Is 21st century science about to unlock the age-old secret of the Yeti?
This could be the real Yeti. Maybe he's existing.
A couple of years ago, I was involved in an extraordinary university-based project to see if 21st century science could finally solve the mystery of the Yeti. Well, the result proved to be incredibly thought-provoking, but also massively controversial. Based on the DNA analysis of the two most credible hair samples we could find in the high Himalayas, the lead scientist proposed that the biological explanation for the Yeti could be some kind of polar bear hybrid.
I think that where the Yeti is seen, it's actually one of these hybrid bears because they're not behaving like a normal bear. Polar bears hunt humans, so perhaps these hybrid bears in the Himalayas do that too. And that would add to its reputation and the fear that everybody has of the Yeti.
Professor Sykes's bold idea certainly challenged the standard view. But for some, he was stretching the evidence too far. As you can imagine, it was the equivalent of throwing a hand grenade into the world of both bear evolution and Bigfoot research. And a debate has raged ever since. Put simply, we still don't know if a polar bear hybrid exists or has ever existed in the Himalaya, let alone whether it explains the Yeti. So I'm picking up my investigation in Italy, where I've come to question an important eyewitness. Reinhold Messner is one of the world's greatest mountaineers. Renowned for making the first ascent of Mount Everest without carrying oxygen, he was also the first to summit all 14 of the world's 8,000-metre peaks. Even after losing 7 toes to frostbite, he was unstoppable. But it's not his superhuman achievements I've come to talk about. Now in his 70s, Messner is one of the few Westerners who actually claims to have seen a Yeti.
I was trying to cross the eastern part of Tibet. After 2 weeks, more or less, I arrived at a river. These rivers are very difficult because my toes are not there. The balance is not perfect. When I was out on the other side, it was getting dark. And in this moment, this creature was in front of me. It was clearly on two legs, very near. And it was going very quickly, like a human being.
Did it make any noise? Could you smell it?
It made a noise like this. Quite a strong smell. A few seconds later, it was gone, disappearing in the dark of the woods.
Forgive me, but I've got to ask this. Did you think at any point, you were exhausted, you were wet, it was high altitude, that it was all playing tricks on your mind?
No. I was totally in good shape mentally. I went to the spot where he was standing. I could see the footprints. And so I was beginning to say to myself, but this could be the real Yeti. Maybe he's existing.
Messner was hooked. With typical single-mindedness, he found out everything he possibly could about the legend.
After my sighting, I begin seriously to ask everywhere about the Yeti.
So was it? Despite the strange human-like footprints, he soon reached a more plausible conclusion.
There is no doubt for me that the Yeti legend is based on a bear. And it became 100% clear there is no other answer.
Large bears are found in the Himalaya, and they're about as rare as Yeti sightings. But could the beast that stalked Messner have been something even more unusual? A hybrid bear, perhaps, with polar bear DNA. During a later expedition, Messner claims to have seen an odd-looking bear.
I could see at least one with a white head, at least partly white head. I think it's a population with certain things, certain hair, certain size, and maybe some different behaviors. And they eat a lot of meat.
So let me be clear about this then. You're saying the Yeti is a special form of brown bear?
The Yeti story is based on a special bear, on a huge bear, living in the Himalayas. This special bear is the bear and the Yeti in one.
On the face of it, it does sound like Messner's special bear could be a little bit polar bear. It's big, it's partly white, and in Tibet at least, it appears to be notably carnivorous. But the hard genetic evidence for a polar bear hybrid is extremely limited. And aside from bears, recent discoveries in human evolution have thrown up another equally enticing Yeti candidate. And it's a possibility that I've also been busy exploring. Now, the idea that the Yeti is based on some kind of prehistoric human is regarded by most people as pretty implausible, but I'm about to meet a man who is convinced he has seen recent evidence of just such a creature. Just 9 months ago, respected British mountaineer Steve Berry saw something that completely stunned him. He was in remote northern Bhutan, revisiting a place he'd been 3 decades earlier.
I managed to get a permit to go up there, up near the highest unclimbed mountain in the world, Gangapun Sum. The royal family have said no mountaineering in Bhutan, so no climbing. Now, this was all about just exploring. Okay. I just wanted to see the other side, see what it looked like, go exploring up there, and see whether it matched the dreams I'd had. This is October last year, and we got up there and spent a bit of time, exploring right up on the Tibetan borders. So we did a bit of scouting around and reconnaissance, and we decided that we'd try and get to that col there to see if it was a pass, to see whether we could use it to go over into the western side, where I'd been in 1986. We'd literally just got up to the col. We'd only been there a couple of minutes, and Karma said, "Hey, Steve, look, there's some really unusual tracks." And we happened to spot some really strange tracks.
That's an extraordinary print, isn't it?
It's an incredible set of tracks. 1 foot exactly in front of the other, all the way across. Not a bit of, feet slightly apart or anything like you would expect of some four-legged creature.
When you looked at these tracks, what went through your head?
We said, that's got to be a biped of some sort.
How can you be so sure there is no possibility of there being people here?
This is days and days away from human habitation. It is completely in the middle of nowhere. I mean, it really is uninhabited, unexplored, unmapped.
If somebody wanted to try and hoax Westerners, how hard would it be to get up there and actually create those footprints artificially?
The only way into that valley is across the glacier and through here. You can see, even in this picture, that it's highly crevassed. It might take you 2 or 3 days to actually find the route through.
It's crazy extreme territory, isn't it?
You would have to have serious mountaineering gear to get up onto that slope.
It can't be a hoax on that basis.
No, it's really not possible.
So why not snow leopard?
Snow leopard prints are offset. It just wouldn't put 1 foot in front of the other like that.
No possibility in your mind that it could be a bear?
I've seen bear prints on snow on a number of occasions. It's a big creature. It walks with its feet apart. It has a double track.
On your way back down, did you show anybody the pictures?
It was 3 days down to the nearest hamlet, 4 houses, and this lady and her husband were standing in their porch. So we got talking, and eventually he talked to me about the Yeti.
So what did he think of your photos?
He looked at them and said immediately, "Oh yes, Migu."
Without hesitation?
Without hesitation.
Migu is the local name for a wild man or Yeti, and Steve was careful to note down what the villager told him about this creature.
He said the Migu lived up in the snows. He had seen it once, 11 years ago. It stood still, upright, arms by its side. It was human height. He said it was well known that the Yeti could imitate the sounds of a dog, cat, horse or yak. They're well used to seeing bear tracks. They know the difference. He said you can always tell a Migu track because they place 1 foot in front of the other.
What do you think made those tracks?
I don't think it's a bear. I don't think a bear could make tracks like that. And up until this point in time, I was convinced that the whole legend was something to do with an unusual kind of bear. But having seen these tracks, I'm completely convinced that it is not a bear. And I'm on the side of the Sherpas and believe that there is some sort of bipedal animal up there that we just don't see very often. And it has a vast, vast area where it can keep away from humans.
Human, bear, or make-believe? To get any further with my Yeti investigation, I need to follow this legend back to its source, into the thin air of the high Himalaya. My first destination is a remote valley in northern Nepal.
Not much is known about the high-altitude bears of the Himalaya. They're very thin on the ground and rarely seen. So I'm heading for a very remote part of northern Nepal, close to the Tibetan border, which is a renowned hotspot. It's been a conflict zone where bears have been blamed for raiding precious crops and for killing livestock, including horses and cows. It's clear that some of the killers, at least, are powerful predators. And I'm intrigued to know whether that's because they're a little bit polar bear.
Unlike grizzlies, polar bears are known to deliberately hunt humans. But no one is suggesting that these Arctic predators live here. What's being proposed is a hybrid bear, part polar bear, part brown bear. And to test this theory, I need to get my hands on body parts. DNA preserved in fur, bones, or even flesh just might take me a step closer to solving the mystery of the Yeti. In this region, up to 20 livestock are taken by bears each year, at a cost to local communities of around $10,000. Between 2005 and 2012, there was almost one bear attack per year on humans. With so many encounters, I'm hoping these communities can provide me with some biological samples from the valley's marauding bears. Right at the start of this investigation, I was eager to team up with Dr. Charlotte Lindquist, a world expert in bear genetics. All brown bears belong to the same species, but while they've been thoroughly studied in Europe and America, it seems we don't know much about them in the Himalaya.
We know so little about the brown bears in this area, in the Tibetan Plateau and in the Himalayan mountains. Very, very little has been done. Very few samples have been analyzed. They're just very rare. In the western mountains, they're known as the Himalayan brown bear. The brown bears that are found on the Tibetan Plateau are called the Tibetan brown bear, but they are all the same species.
So what if we throw a polar bear hybrid into the mix as another kind of subspecies of brown bear? Is that possible? How would that fit in?
Well, polar bear distribution is entirely associated with the extent of the sea ice. And there's no sea ice in the Himalayan mountains. But, I mean, it could be that ancestors of these populations may have been interbreeding. So the descendants have some polar bear kind of DNA in them.
But it is theoretically possible that a polar bear hybrid could exist in the high Himalaya.
I still would say it's not theoretically impossible, but I definitely would want to see more data to be either convinced or refute this hypothesis.
So given the fact that we know so little genetically about the brown bears in the high Himalaya, it's possible that either one of those that do exist that we know about could have evolved from ancestors that had polar bear in them, or there's another bear out there that we don't even know about yet that has polar bear in it.
It's certainly not impossible. I mean, new species are being found all the time. It's just that we know so little about the brown bears in the area already that it would be interesting to get to know more about them before we start speculating, I think, about a whole different subspecies.
Okay, so what needs to be done to settle it?
Samples, samples, samples. It's always what we need. Definitely, it would be interesting if we could get more samples from the area.
What I'm interested in, obviously, is just knowing, are there polar bear, brown bear hybrids in the high Himalaya? If I get you samples, will you categorically be able to tell me what they are?
If I can get DNA from them, yes. I will be able to tell you what they are.
Hybrid bears do exist. About 10 years ago, a trophy hunter shot a rather weird-looking bear in the Canadian Arctic. DNA tests confirmed that its dad was a grizzly bear and its mum a polar bear. Several years later, when another so-called growler bear was shot, it turned out to be a second-generation hybrid, which goes to prove these crossbred animals can reproduce successfully. But how could growler bears end up in the high Himalaya, so far from the Arctic? What are these hybrids actually like? Well, we know from radio tracking brown bears that dispersing males can travel hundreds of miles. So it's possible, at least in theory, that polar bear DNA could penetrate quite rapidly into Central Asia. As for the effect of this exotic DNA, there's a revealing study from Osnabrück Zoo in Germany. After 24 years of sharing the same enclosure, a male polar bear and a female brown bear finally got it together. And their hybrid cubs, called tips and taps, were a kind of mash-up between the two species. So long neck, furry soles, unmistakably polar bear, broad face, rounded shoulder humps, clearly brown bear. In terms of behaviour, though, tips and taps turned out to be much more like their dad. They'd pounce violently on things with their paws and then shake them really harshly with their jaws, both behaviours that polar bears do when they're hunting seals on the ice. So could some of this polar bear aggression have found its way into the bears of the Himalaya? And if so, could it have anything to do with Yetis? It's late summer, and in Nepal's Sum Valley, I'm looking for physical evidence of a possible polar bear hybrid. Villagers here have been clashing with bears, and with help from my guide, Tashi Bista, I'm hoping to find out more about these marauding predators and get my hands on some all-important samples for Charlotte. Do many trekkers come up here?
Well, not a lot. I mean, like, it's quite a remote area. Actually, you're the first foreigner after the earthquake.
My first eyewitness is a man called Chitra, a farmer and village elder. Chitra, what problems have the bears caused you? Has anybody been killed by the bears?
बाख्रा बेराहरूलाई पनि उनीहरूले चाहिँ समय-समयमा नष्ट गर्छ मार्दिन्छ बारातिर गर्छ दुईटा जति चाहिँ मान्छेले चाहिँ एउटा त मार्यो एउटा चाहिँ यहाँबाट चाहिँ उसको हालले चाहिँ यस्तो उसको नाङ लामो हुने रहेछ है मान्छेले यस्तो गर्ने साथ त सबै कोतारेर छाला काटेर मासुसम्म काटेर उसमा
It soon emerges that Chitra has seen two very different kinds of bear.
ताला बसिनले त त्यो तालाको चाहिँ कालै हुने रहेछ यसो गरेर यसो यसो जुन र गाम्रे.
These details point clearly to an Asian black bear, a species that only lives in forested areas.
माथि अलिक लेकको चाहिँ अलिक मैलो भन्ने कि खैरो भन्ने त्यस्तो देख्ने रहे जो हुने रहेछ फुल्ला चाहिँ तालाको भन्दा सेदम चाहिँ बढी मुका हुन्छ अब मान्छेहरू देख्यो भने बढी सिधै मान्छेलाई चाहिँ टोक्नु पर्छ उसको नाङै करिब करिब 2-3 इन्च 4 इन्च होला.
Could this more aggressive creature, I wonder, be the hybrid bear? Though he doesn't have any fur or bones from this animal, Chitra's description of it echoes what Messner told me back in Italy.
A bear can easily kill a yak. He can kill it with one hand on the neck. Like, it needs only one strike and a human being would be gone.
To reach brown bear country, I need to go higher. We started our journey at an altitude of 7,500 feet, but the valley climbs towards peaks that butt up against the Tibetan plateau at almost 15,000 feet.
So how far is Tibet? Well, Tibet is not very far from here. We're actually almost very near to the border. The last mountains that you can see, it's just behind, you know? It's probably like, say, 3 days walking distance for the locals, you know?
Yeah. So 3 days walking for the locals, that's what?
Yeah.
10
That's
days
like,
for them?
yeah, exactly.
We continue up the valley. Most of the communities here are of Tibetan origin, and there's a long history of Buddhism. We pass sacred walls covered in carved stones. Who would have built these prayer walls originally? Was it the monks?
Yeah, it's the village people and the monks, you know, for their devotion towards Buddhism. They just like inscribe, like carve all the rocks, put them here. So when you walk past them, it's actually like you're like humming all the prayers. You're making all the prayers that are inscribed on the rocks.
So it's kind of like speed reading the prayers.
Exactly, it is kind of.
And that's the same when you turn the prayer wheels.
Exactly.
You're speed reading, and because do you get kind of more tokens on your route to nirvana the more prayers you read?
Yeah, well, that's what the Buddhists believe in.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah. And the typical Om Mani Padme Hum is like a mix of 8,000 prayers, the major prayers in Buddhism. So it's like you're humming all the mantras, you know.
So walking that wall is more prayers than I've ever done in my life.
Exactly, walking clockwise.
We climb towards the head of the valley. I'm hoping to find organic remains from predatory bears to test the controversial theory that the Yeti is some kind of polar bear hybrid. But my investigation is about to spread beyond just bears.
Okay, let's see on the map. On the border with Tibet.
Okay, oh, so way further up.
So he says once around January, February, he saw the footprints of the brown bear on the way up. He could tell that it had gone up. And then they were crossing to Tibet. And then when they came back, they could see the footprints of the bear coming down again.
Was it easy for him to tell it was a bear footprint?
He says you can tell the brown bear because it has like this little very big, slightly longer, and then another finger here which is quite small. Tibet but he says there's a species in Tibet that the footprints look exactly like human, and they're not like this. They have like legs like this, but that's in Tibet.
And what makes those footprints?
And he says it walks on 2 feet.
Really?
He says if we see them, they come to attack us. It's called a mite.
A mite?
Yeah.
Okay.
He said it's found mostly in Tibet, not here. He says once he saw a dead one. Some people in Tibet had shot it.
What did it look like?
He says it looks like exactly like a human face. And he says that it was a shepherd who had gone to find his goats up in the mountains, and then he saw it, and it started chasing him. So he ran back and got his gun and shot it many times.
That's really interesting.
It's strange and interesting.
Wow, thank you very much. To most of us, hairy wild men in the woods are about as believable as elves. They belong firmly in the realms of folklore. But then, just over 10 years ago, scientists in Indonesia made the incredible discovery of a real-life hobbit. East of Java, on the island of Flores, a Dutch scientist had heard folk tales about tiny, primitive-looking humans who were said to steal crops from villagers and sometimes babies before scampering back to their caves in the jungle. In the local Nage language, these voracious little people are known as Ibu Gogo, which roughly translates as Granny Glutton. In stories, these Ibu Gogo are very skillful at imitating the complex sounds of human speech, but not surprisingly, no one really paid any attention to any of this until 2003, that is, when in West Flores, excavations in a jungle cave unearthed the fossilized bones of, you guessed it, a tiny, primitive type of human. Suddenly, the Ibu Gogo didn't sound quite so make-believe. It appeared they might even be a folk memory from a time when we shared our world with a race of chattering, spear-wielding, hobbit-like humans. More than a decade on, and Homo floresiensis remains a mystery. We don't yet know who her ancestors were or how they managed to get to Flores. But crucially, most experts agree not just that Floresiensis really is a different kind of human, but that they overlapped with us. The latest radiometric dates tell us that they were around until about 50,000 years ago, the same time that we modern humans were spreading across Asia. The remarkable story of Indonesia's recently extinct little hobbits has been a real eye-opener. It even prompted the acclaimed science journal Nature to suggest that stories of other supposedly mythical humanoids, including Yetis, could be based on more than just tales. My search for fresh bear samples is proving tougher than I expected. If there's any comfort, it's that I've already managed to acquire several older samples from previous trips. When I went to meet Dr. Lindquist, I handed over these existing samples for genetic testing. Okay, now these are things collected over the last couple of years. First is this one, which is from a monastery. And it's claimed to be about 40 years old.
So where did you say this was from?
I didn't, and I'm not going to. Not now, because I mean, there's so much controversy surrounding this. I just want you to be able to focus on them as biological specimens.
Okay.
I will tell you eventually. So the next one is this one. Now this was collected allegedly by a Jesuit priest. And about 60 years old.
So if we're able to get DNA from these samples here, then we're able to use very specific markers where we can identify what kind of animal it is, and if it's a bear, what kind of bear it is, and if there's any recent signature of hybridization.
With polar bears.
With polar bear. It'll be very, very interesting. I'm looking forward to this.
My third sample was given to me by Messner, and it comes with a bizarre backstory. On the eve of World War II, 5 officers from the Nazi SS sneak into Tibet, where they hope to persuade the Hermit Kingdom to attack the British Empire. But for SS leader Heinrich Himmler, there was another, more racist objective.
Especially the people around Himmler, they were hoping to find an animal which was looking like a human being. They were hoping to find the proof of a special human being, of a stronger, better, bigger human. They wanted to show that the Aryan race is something special. And they were hoping that the Yeti, the snowman, is one part of the Aryan race.
Group leader Ernst Schaefer was a keen hunter, but in the absence of Yetis, all he collected were a few high-altitude bears. Trophies that now belong to Messner. Do you think Schaefer could have been having a bit of fun, a practical joke? From the letters you wrote to him, do you think he was a funny man?
No, he was not British, he was German.
So this is just not very good taxidermy. With luck, DNA expert Dr. Charlotte Lindquist will dig genetic gold out of this Nazi Yeti. Back in Nepal, I'm hoping to find more recent samples, but I'm running out of valley. After a lot of climbing, my guide Tashi and I can almost see the top of the valley and the border with Tibet. The earthquakes of 2015 that killed thousands and displaced millions across Nepal shook this valley too, not only blocking the main access route, but also destroying houses. While in every village I pass, some people are rebuilding their homes. Everyone else here is busy with the harvest. But my search for Yeti samples has so far failed to reap reward.
Namaste. Namaste.
It's clear that we're deep in bear country.
He says that he has seen some bears that are black and they have the white mark here. He says there's somebody there who encountered a bear.
But all the stories are about the smaller black bear.
She says she just saw a black bear like this tall, just across the river on the forest. It was climbing a tree.
It's in the tree. Yeah, that fits.
Oh, she said it's not a Yeti because it walks on four legs.
Okay. When it comes to body parts, no one has anything to offer. And when I ask about the Mite or wild man, the villagers just point up to the top of the mountain. The last stop before the Tibetan border is a small monastery. It's a 6-hour climb, but according to Messner, Yeti relics are sometimes kept by the monks for special ceremonies.
If you find one of the relicts, a head, a hand, they are normally in the cellars of the monastery.
The legend of the Yeti is ancient, possibly very ancient.
In my view, the legend is older than the beginning of Buddhism, maybe 15,000 years.
The weather and the night are closing in, but we're still trekking. Tashi, how many hours did you say it would take?
I thought it would take like around 5 hours.
5 hours, Tashi. We've been walking for 9 hours. We've just come up a monumental hill in the dark. And Tashi says, when you get to a stupa, the monastery is just beyond it. Okay?
I didn't say it's just beyond. I mean, we're entering the area.
You're entering the area of the stupa. Now, if you'd like to look up that hill, you might see a dim light behind us. A dim light behind us, Tashi says, is the monastery. Whether I believe him, I have no idea. How long will it take us to get there?
That's what we're about to find out.
No. How long will it take us to get there?
Well, I believe we'll make it in 20 minutes.
Yeah, right. 20 minutes.
almost there. It's been quite a walk, huh? Just a little.
Few outsiders venture this far. But even at this late hour, we're welcomed inside.
We're here, man. Put it there.
You made it.
Is this my bed? It is now.
So much for reaching the top of the mountain. Sunrise reveals still bigger peaks rising above me on every side. My ears, meanwhile, are filled with the hypnotic murmur of chanting monks. Oh. Morning. Welcome to my bedroom in the monastery. I was so knackered last night, I can't tell you, but we got a great night's sleep, me and Tashi, although it was a bit cold, I have to say, at such high altitude. But you step from our little bedroom into the kitchen, and it's lovely and toasty. We're being looked after here by the incredible Norbu, Namaste Norbu, who sorts out all our meals, and he has to be the coolest monk in the hood. But then I opened the door from the darkness this morning to this. What an extraordinary view. Good morning, my friend. How are you? This is the heart of the monastery. You can see the temple behind the horses. It's almost completely self-sufficient, this monastery. But if they do need any supplies from the outside world, then it's all brought up here by these incredibly hard-working horses. Morning prayers are currently in progress. You can kind of tell that because the slip-on shoes, the sandals, are outside. And this is the heart of where all the praying and chanting takes place. You can hear that I'm slightly out of breath because at this height still, even though I've been walking for days, I'm still not properly adjusted. And the air is pretty thin. But I've already got Tashi at work.
Good morning, Mark. How are you?
I'm good, I'm good.
Good.
It was very hard yesterday.
Yeah, you look like a tramp now.
Thanks very much. I know. I haven't dared even look in a mirror. So you're chopping some wood for Norbu?
Yeah, we were just getting some wood prepared for the firewood.
That's cool. You just love working, don't you? This man runs up and down these mountains. He's absolutely extraordinary. Now, Tashi thinks that he's just helping out the monks, but actually, secretly, I organised it as a penance for him telling me it was only 4 hours to get up here. What really takes your breath away, though, is the view. I'm currently standing at around 12,000 feet, but towering way above me in the distance there, that snow-capped peak is the top of Mount Ganesh. And I have to say, it does look a little bit like a Yeti itself. Now, down there, that is black bear country. But if you carry on walking the trail, down below the monastery down here, you start to get more and more scrubby hillsides, and that's classic brown bear country. And then you hit this incredibly inhospitable, harsh, barren environment up there. Now, that wall of rock is essentially the border with Tibet. This is as far as foreigners like me are allowed to go. After his morning mantras, head Lama Lobsang Tashi agrees to see me. During his 40-odd years here, he's heard a lot of tales, including stories of a dangerous being called a Mirai. Can you tell me about the Mirai? What is it? So how big is it? How tall? That's too short for a brown bear. Perhaps I'm taking what he says too literally. Do you think the mirai is a real animal or a spiritual animal? I'm trying to find body parts, hair or bone or flesh. Do you have a relic from this animal that I could have a look at?
Samples, samples, samples. The more DNA we look at, the better.
My failure to get new samples is becoming a problem. But it's striking that even the llama thinks the Yeti either is or was something real. If I want to find out more about the mirai, where do I need to go and who do I need to speak to? It seems the higher you climb in the Himalaya, the more likely you are to hear about the Yeti. Next time, my search takes me into spectacular new territory, an ancient Tibetan kingdom, where finally I get my hands on some samples.
Oh, that is gruesome.
Some clearly bare, others more mysterious.
The way this is shaped is quite human.
And I pursue the idea the legend could be based on a once real wild man. DNA will reveal the truth.
If I can get DNA from them, I will be able to tell you what they are.